Hello, friends. Welcome to another episode of Truth for Life. In today's episode, we're going to be looking at the biggest problem. And again, I'm Dr. Mark Sandoval, and it is my pleasure to walk with you to freedom together. But we've got some challenges along the way, and today it's going to be a challenge. You and I are created by God as intelligent creatures, and as we've talked about before, intelligent creatures are created to govern themselves. And the very beginning of self-government is our identity. We self-govern according to who we are, who we understand ourselves to be. And everything that we need comes from outside of us. So the love that we need, then the respect and honor and truth and security and all of these different things, plus also everything that we need physically comes outside of us. But right now we're talking about the mind or the spirit, and so we're going to look at spiritual needs, and every spiritual need that you have comes from outside of you, and if it stays out there, well, you die. It must be brought in order for you to live, and it's your own action that brings in what you need so that you can live by it. You are not created so that anything spiritual can be forced into you. You must reach out and take it. And for everything that you need, there is a source for the thing that you need. You and I were created, of course, with trust. And trust binds us to the source. It's what binds ourselves to the source. And then by faith, we take the spiritual needs that we need and bring them in. Adam and Eve, at the beginning, were created with God as their source, of course, and with the identity that they were children of God. So Adam understood he was a child of God. Eve understood that she was a child of God. And they were automatically had trust in God and bound to him by trust and taking by faith what they needed from God. And when you take what you need, well, your needs are fulfilled. And that's pleasurable. And God made it pleasurable for your needs to be fulfilled. But you were not created just to take. You were created to take and to give. And what do you give? Well, you can only give what you took because you're not a creator. You don't create anything. You're a channel. You take from one place and you give to another place. And so all that you can give is what you took, right? All that you can give is what you took. And so if you took love, you give love. If you take respect, you give respect. If you take honor, you give honor. Whatever you take, that you will give. And it's not only pleasurable in order to take what you need, it's also pleasurable to give to others what they need. And we were created this way to never be forced from the outside, but always to govern ourselves from the inside. Adam, again, created in the image of God, created by God himself. Adam was bound to God by trust. He had the identity that he was a child of God, and through that identity, he bound himself to God by trust, and he took everything that he needed from God, and he took it so that he could give it. And of course, God created Adam without Eve, mind you, that's an important point. And so he was taking from God, and now he had the rest of creation that he could give to. And so it might be, it's nice to have a lion, it's nice to have a giraffe, it's nice to have other animals of that nature. But if you see a beautiful flower, if you smell its beautiful perfume, if you see a wonderful sunrise or sunset or beautiful things around you, there's only so much that you can tell to the kitty. It just doesn't have the capacity to understand. And so while Adam had access to God and was complete, having God as his source, taking everything that he needed, yet there was something missing on the giving side. There was something missing on the giving side. He didn't have someone of his same capacities and same abilities that he could give to and that he could share with what he had taken from God. So God takes Adam and puts him to sleep, and he takes a rib out and he creates Eve. And so Eve comes from Adam. And Eve as well has the identity that she's a child of God. And by trust, she is bound to God. And by faith, she takes what she needs from him and she gives to the rest of creation. But again, just as in Adam's situation, she cannot be completely fulfilled according to how she has been created, because she was created not just to take, but to give. Now, on the taking side, she was complete because she had God as her source and he was everything that she needed. But there was something missing on the giving side. It wasn't until Adam was awakened after that now both Adam and Eve could take from God, bound by him by trust because they were children of God, and they could give to each other and the rest of creation to the complete degree that God designed for them in creation. Again, we remember the law shows us of our great need. The first 3 commandments are telling us don't take from here, don't take like that. The last 5 commandments similarly are telling us don't take from here, don't take like that. And the 4th commandment is calling us to rest. You're not rested when you're suffocating and starving and dehydrating. You're rested when your needs are met, when you have had enough to drink, enough to breathe, enough to eat. And so that Sabbath commandment, that 4th commandment, is calling us to come and to take all that we need so that we can be full from God. And in that fullness, we can be rested. It's calling us to have God as our source. And then the 5th commandment says that we are to give. We are to give honor to our father and our mother. Well, how much honor do you have yourself to give to your mother and father? You can try, but it's probably not going to work so well. If you are separated from God, you're not going to be able to honor them at all. The only way that you can honor them is if you take from the source of honor, then you can take the honor, now you can give the honor to your parents. That's the only way that it'll work. And that's what the law shows us. And the law shows us that we are dependent upon God. He is the one we take from. He is the one that we are dependent upon. We are not to be dependent upon other people. You're going looking for a place to buy, and you've got this place out in the wilderness. We've talked about this. I'm just covering it again in this context. And the place in the middle is for sale, and it's just the right price, and you buy it. It's wonderful. You have good water from upstream, you take good water, you have good water, and you pass the good water along. And that's how it works. You take it, you've got it, and then you get to give it. And if the neighbor downstream from you messes up that water, they muck it up somehow, well, you still have all the good water you need. You can still have good water to drink and good water to water your crops and good water for hydroelectric power and whatever you need. And that what the neighbor does just goes on downstream. But if you have a neighbor upstream from you that is not so good, well, now you're going to get what they've got. And if they have some dirty stuff that they give, that's what you're going to get, that's what you're going to have, and that's what you're going to give without a choice. That's just how it works. So it's important who you have as a source. Vitally important. Vitally important who you have as a source. We want to have a good source because we were created for good. And when we have a good source, we can take good and we can give good. And whoever we're giving to, they can be however they are. That's okay. We don't need them to be a certain way for us because we already have the good that we need from our good source. And the law shows us that our good source is to be God, and that we're dependent upon Him. And when we take from Him, He is selfless, unselfish, self-sacrificing. And so what we get is selfless love. And that's what we get to pass along to others. And so when we have God as our source, He is a good God, He is a good source, and we get good from Him. And then we have good, and then we can pass the good along. But when we have people upstream, we're told that there is none who does good, no, not one. So when we have other people upstream from us, we don't get what's good, we don't have what's good, and we cannot give what is good. You can't help what you give. Let me put it this way. Let me rephrase that. If you have a bad source, you can't help but give bad. If you have a bad source, you cannot help but give bad. You can only give good by having a good source. So if you are giving bad, if you have bad words, and you have bad thoughts, and you have bad responses, and you have bad actions, that's not the problem. That's only the manifestation of the problem. The problem is the source that you're taking from. Clearly, if you are giving what is bad, you have a source that is bad. And the fix, the solution, is not to change what you are doing or how you are speaking or things of that nature. The solution is to change your source. Then what comes out of you will be fixed. It will happen. So we need God as our source, and that is vitally important. If you don't take, well, you don't have anything and you can't give anything. And if you take but you try to keep it to yourself, that's not going to work so well either. You're just going to destroy everything and still be useless to others. The only way that it works is if you take in order to give. You take in order to give. And if you have God upstream and you have people downstream and He is good and they're not good, you can be good. But if it's flipped the other way, I don't care how good God is, you can't be good. Because if you have people as your source who are not good, you cannot be good. Doesn't work. Cannot work. And so, again, the law shows us that we are to take from God in order to give to others. And we serve as a channel, and this is love. Love is taking everything we need from God, filling up with it, and out of the fullness, giving to others. And I do so recognizing that I am a child of God. Again, I self-govern from the standpoint of identity. And as a child of God, then I function this way in harmony with the law of God. And Jeremiah 17, verses 7 and 8, show us what this looks like. It says, "Blessed is the man who trusts in the Lord." Remember, by trust you bind yourself to God. "And whose hope is the Lord. For he shall be like a tree planted by the waters, which spreads out its roots by the river, and will not fear when heat comes. But its leaf will be green, and will not be anxious in the year of drought, nor will cease from yielding fruit." So here we see, and Jeremiah is showing us, that if we have God as our source and we're bound to Him by trust, all sorts of chaos and problems and other stuff like that might come around us, but it doesn't affect inside of us. We are like a tree by the river. The roots still get what it needs. It might be hot and dry and whatever around us, but we don't dry up, our leaves don't wither, and we don't stop yielding fruit. And this is God's desire for us. We're told that higher than the highest human thought can reach is God's ideal for His children. This is what He desires for us. This is how He desires us to be. But there's something else going on, and we need to dive into the problem. We're also told that while God was seeking man's good, Satan was seeking his ruin. So, you know the story. We all know the story. There's the story of Adam and Eve. Eve wandering near the forbidden tree, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and the temptation that came there. And we'll look at that briefly. And so we see in Genesis chapter 3 and beginning in verse 1, it says, "Now the serpent was more cunning than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. And he said to the woman, Has God indeed said, You shall not eat of every tree of the garden?" This is an ingenious question. It really is. This question is asked in such a way that if Eve answers one way, she's wrong, and if she answers in the other way, she's wrong. In essence, the question is the tree of knowledge of good and evil, is it bad? And if so, did God make something that's bad? If she answers, well, no, or yes, the tree is bad, and that's why he's withholding it from us, well, then the conclusion would be that God must be bad if he created something that is bad. And if she says, well, no, it's not bad, then his response would be, well, then God, if he's withholding from you something that is good, then he must be bad. That's right. Oh, difficult spot that she was in. So how did she respond? Well, let's go on reading. "And the woman said to the serpent, We may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God has said, You shall not eat it, nor shall you touch it, lest you die. Then the serpent said to the woman, Oh, Eve, I came to this tree months ago. And when I came to this tree months ago, I began to eat its fruit. And I was able to speak and to understand and to reason. And I got powers that I didn't even know were possible. And I have been eating from this tree for months now, and I'm not dead. And you're not going to die either. And God knows that you are so much greater than me at your creation, so that when you eat from this fruit, you will be like God." And that's what he said. You will not surely die. For God knows in the day that you eat of it, your eyes will be open, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. Now, before we're hard on Eve and her deception here, we need to recognize that Eve had never had a bad conversation before. Everyone that she had ever talked to had her best interest in mind. She had talked to God, she had talked to angels, she had talked to Adam, and so on. And so she had, every conversation she had had was good. And so she'd never had a bad conversation. And this was a masterful deception. And so we'll cut her a little bit of slack there in relation to her, her temptation and her fall. But in the process of her coming to the point of recognizing her, of coming to the point of eating of that fruit, she had to trust Satan, which means that she had to distrust God, because you can only have one source, and you're bound to your source by trust. And so she had to move her trust from God to Satan, which means she had to trust Satan and distrust God. Right? How did she do that? She first had to deceive herself internally that she could be someone or something that she could not be. Because again, we self-govern according to identity. So as a child of God, she could not distrust God. The only way that could happen is if she was self-deceived into believing that she was something she was not. That she, the creature, was more than just a creature. So, being created to govern herself in this way, God gives you the freedom to control and govern yourself. And to what extent God gives you that control and that freedom of self-government, he has no control there. And sin could only arise where God had no control. And because we govern ourselves in harmony with our identity, the fall had to begin right there at identity. Somehow, mysteriously, the creature must deceive itself into believing the impossible about itself. And what is that? I must believe something about myself, which is the identity crisis of humanity. And that is that I, the creature, believe that I am God. Yes. And that is the very foundation of sinful nature, whether in humans or in angels, wherever it is found. It is the idea that the creature believes that they are God. So let's go back to the temptation again, and let's look at it. So here you have Eve, who knows who she is from creation. She's a child of God. By trust, bound to God, and with faith, taking what she needs from him and giving to others. And now she wanders near the tree, not purposely, but she ends up there. And yes, there's a few little warning signs along the way that she might not know exactly what to do with. And then she meets the serpent. He speaks to her out of the tree. And he tells her that the tree is good, and that you will be like God, and you will not die. Now, he has to tell her that she's not going to die because you have no need for death. Adam and Eve had no need for death. You have no need for death, right? You might desire death because you've lost your purpose, but you have no need for death. You actually have a need for life. And so the only way that he could get them to go after the tree was to take away the anti-need of death. No, you're not going to die. And yes, it's good. And yes, you will be like God. You see, the heart evaluates information based upon gain and loss. And you are created so that you always go after gain and you always avoid loss. And if you have a current gain, the only way you're going to give up that current gain is if you are offered a greater gain. That's the only way that you're going to give it up, is if you're offered a greater gain. So, Satan had to present the temptation in such a way to make it appear to Eve that what God withheld from her was greater than what God had given to her. To make her distrust him, to make her question his love for her, to make her think that maybe God did not have her best interests in mind. And now, in doubting God, she now believes that Satan has her best interest in mind and has something better for her than what God had offered to her. But again, she must begin that deception internally by changing who she is, by switching from being a child of God to believing that she could be a God. Now, as a God, she can question God. She can second-guess God. She can choose her own way rather than his way. She can go in another way. But when she took that identity that she was a child of God, then automatically she cut herself off from God, because if you are God, you don't need another God. But if you're still a creature in reality, well, then you have needs. And so now you are going to bind yourself to another source, and she bound herself to Satan. She took his information, and since his information said the tree is good, and you will be like God, and you will not die, all of that is a gain. And so the moment she believed it, she must take the fruit, and she must eat it, because you always go after gain. Now, Eve becomes the messenger for Satan. So all excited, Eve goes to Adam with her arms full of this fruit that she has eaten. She's not dead. She thinks she's in a wonderful state of, she's elevated. Now she's becoming like God. She feels like everything is getting much better and everything. And in this excited state, she comes to Adam and she tells him exactly what Satan told her. The tree is good. No, we will be like gods. No, we're not going to die. I'm not dead. I love you more than I did before. And now Adam is in a significant challenge. Significant challenge. If you love your wife, would you agree that she must die? That was the challenge of Adam. And none of us have ever loved our wives like Adam loved Eve, because our love has been in the context of sinful, fallen, selfish nature. His was a unfallen love, and he had a deep love for Eve, and he knew that she was deceived. He knew this was the trick. He knew that she was fallen, and he knew that she must die, because God said, in the day that you eat of it, you will surely die. And now Adam is challenged whether he is going to agree with God or not. Whether he will agree that, yes, Eve must die. And in that challenge, and it's a significant challenge, a terribly significant challenge, Adam began to contemplate what Eve said. All right, the tree is good. I'll be like God. He will not die. She's not dead. She professes more love for me now. Maybe. And Adam, too, self-deceives. And fearing losing her, he takes in this idea that he, the creature, could become a god. And now he seeks to formulate a different way of saving her or joining her that apparently is going to be better than the way that God has designed for things to be. And so he cuts himself off from God as well. He takes Eve as his source. She has said that the fruit is good. It will make us like God. We will not die. And by eating the fruit, he can keep her. She became his idol. And he could not at that point help but eat the fruit, because you always go after gain. And hence, the first woman and the first man of humanity fell. They fell. And Adam and Eve were now in complete harmony with Satan. They had adopted his false identity and his false standard. And now they evaluated everything the same way that Satan evaluated everything, which was opposite from God's standard. Their evaluation system was now turned upside down and backwards. And now they perceived everything the wrong way. And instead of being selfless, they immediately became selfish. Instead of looking out for the best interest of others, they looked out for their own interests. Instead of finding their joy in taking all the good that they needed from God and giving it freely away to others, they started trying to give from themselves so that they could receive good from each other. And their thoughts, their desires, their purposes, their motivations, their natures were now in harmony with Satan's nature, and yet they didn't have the capacity to understand that anything had changed. You see, God had given them a compass to go in the right way. And God's compass would lead them to a beautiful destination and a wonderful journey along the way. And here Adam and Eve are going along and they're following God's compass on the journey that he had designed for them. And Satan comes along, of course, looking very nice. And, snakes were not like they are nowadays. Nowadays, you know them after the curse. But they were beautiful creatures then. And here Satan comes along and he says, oh, hang on, where are you going? Hang on. And he offers them a new compass. Sorry, you guys are going in the wrong direction. Here's the right compass. And they took his compass, which pointed in the wrong direction. And now, still following a compass, still following as they're supposed to, but now with the wrong compass, they go in the wrong direction. Thinking they're going in the right direction. And so now Adam and Eve entered fully into a delusional state where they perceived everything backwards and upside down, and based upon their perceptions, they acted, they spoke, they responded from the wrong motivation, and they reacted and spoke and responded in the wrong way. But they couldn't see that they had a problem. They just couldn't see it. The nature of a delusional state is that the individual who is delusional doesn't know that they are delusional. That's the nature of a delusional state. And the person who believes that there are giant insects crawling out of the wall ready to eat them are just as afraid as if there were giant insects actually crawling out of the wall ready to eat them. You don't have to truly be in danger to be in fear. You only have to believe that you're in danger to fear. You only have to believe it. And they believed the lie. And therefore they got everything of the lie. You do not necessarily act and respond according to reality. You act and respond according to perception. And you will only act and respond in harmony with reality when your perception matches reality. It's the only time it'll happen. So here is God. God has created his creation, and Adam was the connecting link between God and the rest of creation on this earth. And so he was to be taking from God and giving to his creation. He was the manager, the curator, and so on. And the rest of creation on earth was to be taking from what Adam had given. So what happens when the connecting link is broken? What happens to the rest of creation on earth? Well, it gets broken too. So the problem of the fall of Adam was not just a problem of Adam. It became a problem of all of the creation of earth. It became an entire problem. Again, we were created, Adam and Eve were created as children of God, and we were created to take from God everything that we need and give freely to others, and we do that according to identity. But what happens if our identity changes, and now, instead of believing that I'm a child of God, I believe that I am a God? What happens? Well, now I give, but I give from myself because I'm the source. I'm the creator. I can create things, and so now I can just give from myself. But I give in order to receive because I'm actually a creature and I still have needs. And those needs must be fulfilled. And so now I seek to fulfill my needs by giving in order to receive. And I do that to people, and so now I become dependent upon people. Now my dependency has switched from God, and now my dependency is on people. And when I take and I do so in order to receive from others, then I take what I have received from them in order to give to God. And I give to God so that I can receive from him, and I receive from him selfishly, and I do so to try to take it and keep it to myself. So it's all selfish. It's all dependent upon people. It's all going in the opposite, wrong direction. Oh, the law's still there, but it's backwards. And that is the I am God, and that is evil. And that is the fallen nature. That is the fallen nature. And that's where it comes from. That's what it looks like. Now, how many of us have experienced the fallen nature in our own lives? All right, yes, I see the hands and the acknowledgments. Yes, me too. Yes. Is it just when we were adults? Did we just have it, did we finally turn 18 or 21 and now all of a sudden, boom, we've got the problem? No. Well, were we educated into the problem when we were young? Or were we even conceived into the problem? It's a question, right? It's a question we need to ask ourselves. How do we get the problem? In understanding or answering that question, we need to understand a few things. And one of those things that we need to understand is inheritance. Right? Inheritance. So with inheritance, we recognize that every human being has a father and a mother. Right? And that father and that mother, they have information. There's information that is physical. But mind you, information never begins physically. Information always begins in the spiritual realm. It can be absorbed in or put in and contained in and transmitted by physical things, but it always begins in the spiritual. And so there is physical information, and that physical information was created by God, put in Adam, added to in Eve, and now that physical information, God created Adam and Eve to be able to replicate that information from generation to generation to generation to generation to generation. And that physical information is such that it rearranges, sorts, and so on and so forth in the process so that you never get the same information as somebody else does. And everybody is an individual that comes from their parents, and that comes from their grandparents and their great-grandparents and so on and so forth. And so you get half of your father's physical information, and you get half of your mother's physical information, and the half that you get from father is half of the information that makes up your body. And the half that you get from your mother is half of the information that makes up your body. And so, I'm not saying left half, right half. I'm just, trying to illustrate half. So half of the information from father, half of the information from mother. Often we believe that individuals are predisposed to have certain behaviors and so on and so forth because of the genes that we inherit. So because father had these genes and mother had those genes and I got those genes that way, that's why I have certain propensities like my father and certain behaviors like my mother and so on and so forth. No. That's a scientific understanding, but the scientific understanding does not take into consideration the fact that you are not just body, but you are spirit as well. Because science only acknowledges the physical. Science does not acknowledge the spiritual. And in creation, what was first? Well, it was the spiritual. It was God. It was God who spoke, and it was. When he spoke, and it was the spiritual, says God is spirit, and the Word, we're told in John chapter 1, the Word was with God, the Word was God, and we're told that without him was nothing made that was made, and by him all things were made that were made, and that the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. And Jesus said, the words that I speak to you, who is the Word made flesh, he said, the words that I speak to you, they are spirit and they are life. So God, who is spirit, spoke what was spirit, and the physical became. And so the physical is the effect, the spiritual is the cause. Science sees it backwards. Evolutionary theory tells us that it's backwards. It tells us that matter is the cause, and anything spiritual is an effect. So matter generated itself by an explosion of nothing, and when nothing exploded, everything came. And unlike other explosions, instead of everything flying apart, things came together. And then as it came together, matter organized itself. Matter, when it became sufficiently organized, generated life. So life is the effect of the organization of matter. And then matter regulated itself, and as it continued to organize itself and regulate itself through random processes, then it eventually got the capacity to think, right? And so thinking is the effect of matter and its organization. And then thinking, as it continues, becomes more complex and so on. Then you have morality and so on. And so morality and spirituality are simply the effect of the organization of matter. That's what science tells us, or evolutionary theory tells us. But no, in the Bible, we're told that God, in the beginning, God, right? He's the one that spoke. He's the one that we came from. He formed man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. And you and I are not just body, but we are spirit. And in us, like God, it's the spirit that comes first. And so not only did your father have a spirit, but your mother had a spirit as well. And your father had a spirit that was from his father, who was from his father and his parents and their parents and their parents and their parents, and it was from Adam and Eve had fallen before they had any children. And so they had the fallen nature, and you get half of the fallen nature spirit from your father, and you get half of the fallen nature spirit from your mother, and so you get two halves of the fallen nature, and you get a whole copy of the fallen nature. And by inheritance. You didn't ask for it. You didn't want it. You didn't anything of it. You weren't involved in deciding whether that was the case. It simply was. And as a cell, and then as a morula and a blastula and an embryo and a fetus and so on, you had this nature. And when you were born, you had this nature. And when you grew, you had this nature. And you have no guilt for having fallen nature. None whatsoever. There is no accountability to God for having the sinful fallen nature. None whatsoever. So there is no guilt that you get from Adam by having the fallen nature, but the fallen nature will inevitably lead you to commit sin. The acts of sin, right? It'll inevitably lead you in that direction. That doesn't mean that you're born a sinner, no, but you're born with a predisposition, right, in that direction. And yes, Adam and Eve, they had it, and they passed it on to their children, and they passed it on to their children, and they passed it on to their children all the way until when? Until now. So what happens to the self-government of an individual who now has the wrong identity? Well, if I now believe that I'm God, I am going to self-govern according to that identity. Now, I'm taking Satan as my source, and others. But in the case of Adam and Eve's fall, it was his lie, it was his standard, it was his that they bought into, and so we bind ourselves by trust to Satan, not intelligently, not because we choose to, but by our identity, and we have that identity from conception. So we have a predisposition to be completely in harmony with Satan and his will and way. And by faith, we take the lies of the enemy, and we were not made for lies. And so lies do not fulfill our needs. And so when we take those lies, now our needs are unfulfilled, and that's not pleasurable. It's unpleasant. It's discomfort. So we have suffering as the automatic response of that. And now I cannot give out of the fullness that I have taken, and I can't take love I can't give love if I'm taking lies. I can only give what I've got. And so if I take lies, I'm going to give lies. If I take deceit, I'm going to give deceit. If I take dishonesty or dishonor, then I'm going to give dishonor. I have to give what I took. And instead of giving from the fullness, now I try to give in order to receive, and now instead of a gift, it's an investment. And I'm doing so for self's sake. This is what happens. It's a problem. It's a problem. It's definitely a problem. Now, how does the mind work from a conscious and unconscious standpoint? We have the conscious mind, and in the conscious mind, we have the will. Sometimes we think that the will is the master controller, right? It's actually not. It's the thing that puts into action what has already been evaluated. And we'll get into that in a little bit. And so you have needs, physical needs, and the signal of those needs will be sent from the body up to the cortex. That will be appreciated or accepted by the mind. You'll become aware of those needs, and now you'll feel the hunger and the thirst and the suffocation and whatever sensation there comes with the lack of what you need. And you will have a decision of whether you're going to eat or drink or breathe or how you're going to go ahead and supply those needs. There's going to be a decision in relation to that. But not only do you have the will, but you have a personality. And the personality also functions in the conscious mind too. And that personality is a combination of your different spiritual needs, and everybody has their spiritual needs in kind of a different order. So some people are just high on justice, right? Justice is their thing, and everything must be just. Other people, harmony is their thing, and they need to get along with everybody. Some people, security is their thing, and they always have to be secure, and so on. And then you have your secondary, spiritual need, and then your third spiritual need, and so on and so forth. And all of these are organized, and how they're organized gives you an idea of what you're going to prioritize in your decisions. And so that's going to come in and play into your decision making as to how you respond to the eating and drinking and breathing when you have the needs that are presented to the mind. But that's not the only processing. There's also processing in the subconscious mind. Now, we are all individual, all different when it comes to the conscious mind. But when it comes to the subconscious or the unconscious mind, we're all the same here. The processing all happens the same in the unconscious mind of individuals. And the major part of this is what we call the heart. Right? The heart does not process information consciously. It processes information unconsciously. And the heart evaluates things according to gain or loss. And it evaluates it such that you and I, if it's above, there is an indifference line, where we're just, we could care less whether it goes one way or another. But if it's above that indifference line, we are going to say yes to it. And if it's below that indifference line, then we're going to say no to it. That's how the heart is created to function. And so the conscious awareness of the need will then be sent to the unconscious mind and the heart to evaluate that. And if the evaluation is that this is a gain, then the response will be, yes, I'm going to go ahead and eat or drink or breathe or so on. But if the evaluation is that, no, this is going to be a loss, well, I might be thirsty, I might be hungry, I might be suffocating, but I am not going to drink, I am not going to eat, I am not going to breathe. Because there is some greater gain that I'm seeking for, or there's a greater loss that I'm seeking to avoid. And so this is how things function in the conscious and the subconscious mind. Now, to make it not too complicated, we're only looking at two aspects right now, and that is, or three: will, personality, and heart. Right? And if I can be in a place where I can take the gains, and I can have the gains, I'm okay. I'm good there. But the moment I'm forced into loss, and I can't get out of it, now we're going to have problems. We're going to have problems. So when you're faced with loss, and you cannot say no to the loss, then you have a problem. And the question is, why is it that you think that you cannot avoid the loss? And the reason is because you have a wrong worldview. You have a wrong standard that you're evaluating the information by. Because God made you for gain, but He made you for a gain that you cannot lose. He did not make you for a gain that you can lose. So the moment that you lose your treasure, you are lost. But you aren't made to lose your treasure. So let's go then to this a little bit more complex. We'll go to the screen and follow along here. And what we see is that the heart evaluates information. And on one side, one way of evaluating, my gain is to receive. Right? And the more I can receive, the more gain that I have. And also, if I simply receive enough, well, okay, that's okay. I'm still in gain. And the indifference line is in relation to my expectations. And so any time that I am less than my expectations, now, if I receive less than what I expect, now I see myself at loss. What's worse than that? Well, it's receiving nothing. And what's worse than that? It's losing your treasure. So I have various gains and losses. But on the other side, the gain is to give. So on one side it's receiving, on the other side it's giving. And the more I can give, the more gain that I have. My loss is to not give or to keep to myself. And the question is, where can you control your gains and your losses? Can you control them on the left side with the receiving, or can you control them on the right side with the giving? And the answer is, you can only control them on the right side because you can control what you give and what you don't. But you can never control what somebody else gives and therefore what you receive. So our ability to control our gains and losses is freedom, and that can only be found on the right side of the chart, on that evaluation side. And on the left, I cannot avoid loss, but on the right, I can avoid loss. And so let's keep looking at this. On the left, I am dependent upon others. I am a slave to them. And I feel like I'm controlled by them, but I also feel like I need to control them. And on the left side, I give in order to receive. In other words, I invest. I put something of value in others to get something of greater value back. And on the left, I believe that it's mine. So I have it, I'm the owner, and I can create it, I can produce it, I'm the creator. And there is the deception. The deception of the heart is on the left side. And if I give first in order to receive, you see that right up here in the upper corner, right? If I give first in order to receive, then I must be a god, because a god can simply give without first taking. And so there I must be God. And if I have something, if I'm the owner, then I must be selfish, because God is actually the owner, not me. You take two little boys that have, one of them was given a truck for his birthday, and they're both playing out in the yard, and the one that didn't own the truck comes and takes the truck from the boy that did and says, "Mine." Well, that one would be selfish. And so if you believe that things that belong to God belong to you, then that would be selfish. And if you think that you can create things on your own, then you are self-sufficient. Right? And that's a problem. And what about the truth? Well, the truth is on this side that it's not mine. I don't have it. I am a steward. And I can't do it myself. I'm not the creator. I can't produce anything myself. And so therefore I must first take from God as my source in order to give. And I am dependent upon God, and I'm bound to him by trust, and I trust him because I know he's trustworthy, because he behaves well. He is good. And as a steward, I am selfless. I don't see anything as belonging to me. And as a non-creator, I am dependent upon God for all things. And if I take first in order to give, then clearly I am not God, and I am a child of God. And the taking to give, now I give what is a gift, not an investment. So in the first one, I am a slave. In the second one, I am free. And which one would you like to be? The slave or the free? Well, I would like to be free. But let's evaluate this just a little bit longer. We're just going to go a little bit deeper here. When you're on the left and you're under the deception, you believe that you're God, you think things that belong to you, and you're self-sufficient because you're a creator. You're actually a slave to others. You're dependent upon them. And being dependent upon them and a slave to them, you need them to be good. And as long as you're in a relationship with somebody and they are behaving well, you're happy. You're good. But when they start not behaving well, you can't be good because your source isn't good. So you're in a relationship and the other partner is treating you well and they're giving you flowers and you've got conversations and commitment and other things like that. And then, you find out that they're cheating on you. They're sleeping around. They're not being so nice to you. Or maybe it's some more obvious slow things. They're not really paying as much attention to you. They're spending more time on their devices. They're with their friends. They're not spending as much time with you and so on. And they're not so good anymore. When they're not so good anymore, you can't be good anymore because they're your source. But you need to be good, and you were created for good. And so what you must do is you must try to make them be good somehow. How does that happen? Well, manipulation and control. How do we manipulate? Well, sometimes we manipulate from the good side. Good manipulation is where we are kind and we are nice to others and we do nice things for them, but we do so for the sake of them doing nice things for us. And we try to make it happen by being good and happy and so on and so forth around them. And if they mirror that and we get it back, we're like, well, hey, that's great. It worked. It was great. But if they don't, and we keep trying the happy ways and they don't come around and they don't reciprocate, then we eventually stop it. And the fact that we stop it shows that it was, we weren't actually doing it for them. We were doing it for us. Well, we can also manipulate and try to control others with threats, with abuse, by using fear, because it's a powerful motivator. And it can keep somebody with you. If you leave me, I'll kill you. If you leave me, I'll kill myself. If you leave me and you think you can get away, I'll chase down your family. Because I know where they are. So fear can be a powerful motivator, just like the positive sides can oftentimes be a powerful motivator. And when I'm on that left side, when I'm in the deception, I can't help it. I have to try to control others because I see them as my source of my gains, and I can't stop it. The solution is a new heart, where now I'm dependent upon God. I understand I'm His child, and now I can leave others to be free however they are. I don't have to control or manipulate. Want that freedom? Me too.